The Russian invasion of Ukraine was a complex and embarrassing failure, with Russia's intelligence failures being attributed to both Putin himself and the Russian Federal Security Bureau, FSB. The FSB failed to gather good intelligence before the invasion and misjudged the military and political climate in Ukraine. Putin's tight information constraints leading up to the invasion and insistence on managing most aspects of it also led to a direct failure of his goals in Ukraine. Russia's intelligence apparatus is largely dominated by the FSB itself, which constrains the ability to deliver contradictory information. This often leads to infighting between agencies but provides a clearer and nuanced strategic picture than what was available to President Vladimir Putin in February 2022. The FSB's corruption further complicates matters. Prior to the invasion, the Kremlin was still coasting off the success of the 2014 Crimean invasion, which was a highly successful intelligence coup that saw the strategically important peninsula fall quickly to Russian-backed separatists. Russian intelligence had correctly guessed that a significant portion of the population would support a Russian coup and that local actors would take up arms if encouraged against the Kyiv regime. These same actors would also provide for the logistical base needed to support Russian military operations during the early expeditionary phase when Russia was still pretending it was not engaging in an invasion of Ukraine. The story of the Russian-Ukrainian war is yet to be told in its entirety, but it is clear that Russian intelligence assumed that the political environment in Crimea was prevalent across most of Ukraine. Most Ukrainians believed that most Ukrainians would support a Russian invasion and regime change, and the massive, nationwide protests sparked by Ukraine's Russian-backed president snubbing a deal to draw closer to the EU were the result of minority players. The FSB's failure to conduct an intelligence reconnaissance of Ukraine and its military prior to the invasion may have contributed to this misread of the room. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was a massive intelligence operation that was intended to ensure popular backing and little resistance. However, it became clear that the Ukrainian government and military had been penetrated to a small extent, with some units not receiving orders to move out or being delayed or confused by traitors from within. There were even acts of direct sabotage. Despite this, Ukraine was fully prepared to meet the invasion head-on. The FSB stole most of the money, but rumors circulated that the bad intelligence was due to little intelligence work being actually committed. Allegations that the Fifth Service, which is dedicated to the security situation in former Soviet territories, had stolen most of the money may have been substantiated by the following purge conducted within the FSB by Putin, with an unknown number of them arrested or fired from their positions. The GRU would also become the lead on further intelligence within Ukraine. Sergei Beseda, the then head of the Fifth Service, was rumored to have been arrested but later revealed that he had simply been placed under house arrest. Rumors circulated that he had been sent to Lefortovo prison, where Stalin had once committed political purges. US intelligence pushed back against these rumors, and in 2023, he was seen at a public event, with head of state government Kirill Budanov stating, "Beseda continues to perform his official duties." It can be hard to blame Beseda and his Fifth Service cronies for stealing most of the money allocated to their operations prior to the invasion, as nobody in their right mind could have predicted an invasion was coming. Most senior military officials didn't even know an invasion was being planned all the way up to the week before the actual invasion. Individual soldiers didn't know they were being sent to war until as little as a few hours before they were ordered to move out, with many being told to simply follow the vehicle ahead of you. Putin may not actually bear the blame for making this massive blunder, but it is important to understand the concept at the very heart of Russian military and government culture, known as vernio. This practice of collective lying has its roots in the authoritarian and corrupt system of the Soviet Union, which made accurate planning all but impossible. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia was a strategic move, as it was intended to deny the West any leverage in time to mount an appropriate response. This was politically apt, as the US had conducted an exhaustive air and missile campaign against Iraqi infrastructure before invading Iraq during Desert Storm. This left Iraq's air defense network systematically destroyed and senior commanders unable to relay orders or receive them due to destruction of lines of communication. Putin's army did not do this, which made sense as it allowed the West to splinter them in support of Ukraine and prevent an influx of military equipment to the Ukrainian armed forces. The lack of preparation was so extreme that as Russian forces were thrown into retreat or destroyed, Ukrainian soldiers made some astonishing discoveries amongst what was left. One of these discoveries was a soldier who carried with him instructions printed out from Wikipedia on the proper operation of his heavy weapon system. Units were discovered to be carrying maps of Ukraine from the 1960s, and radios were so scarce that many soldiers used their personal cell phones to communicate. This led to a massive intelligence coup for Ukraine and the precision tracking and targeting of Russian forces. If Ukraine had had HIMARS at the start of the war, it is very likely that Russia may have suffered such catastrophic losses to precision strikes that its entire invasion may have been called off after only a few months of fighting. The preparation and coordination was so bad that Russian medics didn't have enough supplies to treat wounded, leading to the looting of pharmacies and any stores in seized territory that had medical supplies. As Russian forces moved into Ukraine, several Russian units marched directly through the red forest that surrounds Chernobyl, dug trenches and fighting positions into irradiated soil, leading to a large number of them being sent to Belarusian hospitals with radiation poisoning. The Russian military's invasion of Ukraine was a complex and multifaceted operation, with little consideration given to the routes it would take. The operation was timed to coincide with frozen ground, allowing vehicles to navigate easily. However, military planners failed to account for the impact of heavy military vehicles on Ukrainian roads, leading to road deterioration and forced vehicles to drive on the shoulder next to the road. As a result, the Russian military became the largest donor of military aid in terms of abandoned tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and air defenses to Ukraine. Russian intelligence and ISR capabilities were so bad that the initial wave of airstrikes meant to shut down Ukrainian air defenses all missed their targets. The Ukrainians, acting on US intelligence, had already moved their air defense equipment, making it difficult to relaunch an airstrike against the latest position. Russia also flew combat missions with an almost criminal disregard for the Ukrainian Air Force, likely operating under the assumption that the UAF would not present significant resistance. In the opening days of the war, Russian strike aircraft flew alone and unescorted, leaving them prey for Ukrainian fighters who flew low under radar coverage. To counter this, Russia opted to fly low and under radar coverage, leaving them vulnerable to Ukrainian man-portable air defenses like Stinger missiles. This culture of corruption and ineptitude is another of Putin's greatest mistakes. For Putin, the thing that may end up costing him the war is a feature, not a bug of his government. One way to ensure loyalty and leverage is to fill senior positions in government with individuals who are either too incompetent to pose a threat, fiercely loyal, or who hate each other more than they hate you. This is on display in the infamous rivalry between former Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Wagner PMC's former leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. While this rivalry was ruinous to the war effort, it prevented the two most powerful threats to Putin's power from joining together. When Prigozhin led his infamous march on Moscow, there are reports that some military officers did show support, but overall the military sided with Shoigu and Putin, undercutting a would-be rebellion. Putin's most fatal mistake was underestimating the West, which had little stomach for a major confrontation with a nuclear power and spoiling its lucrative trade partnership with energy-rich Russia. The Obama presidency took steps to bolster Ukraine's ability to resist a larger invasion, but the White House did little to create a strong deterrent against further Russian aggression. NATO training missions were launched to train Ukraine's military, but there was no chance of Ukraine receiving NATO standard equipment to make itself a hard target against invasion. The Trump presidency only increased Ukraine's vulnerability from the Russian point of view. President Trump repeatedly stressed the global system of partnerships and alliances that the US depends on, especially with Europe. His antagonistic attitude towards European capitals and friendly relations with President Putin fueled assumptions that the West would be incapable of a unified response to a Russian invasion. The Biden administration would work to repair these relationships, But Europe was still leery of the possibility of a single-term Biden and America turning back towards isolationism with a Trump win in 2024. Europe did not do much to deter a Russian invasion either. Fully embracing Russian energy, despite warnings from both the Obama and Trump administrations, Europe had made itself so dependent that Putin believed he had leverage needed to keep Europeans out of Ukraine. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel's policy of containing Russia by engaging in bilateral trade further convinced Russian analysts that Europe would take little interest besides some diplomatic protest in what happened inside former Soviet states that were not a part of NATO. These assessments could not have been more wrong, and Russian analysts should probably have paid closer attention to shifts in the global landscape post-2020. While it was likely impossible to predict Europe, especially Germany, being willing to bear the massive economic pain of breaking energy ties with Russia, other political shifts were more evident. The September 2021 AUKUS pact between the US, UK, and Australia marked a fundamental shift in Pacific power structures, with the US and UK enacting a plan to equip Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. Even if Putin eventually wins the war in Ukraine, his Russia has already lost more than it could gain.